achieving this bowl game, and they really deserved it. They do. They deserved it. As a matter of fact, they haven't missed a bowl game since 2009, so they wanted to keep that streak alive of bowl appearances. FIU, on the other hand, made their first bowl game in a long time last year, and they're still waiting to win it. They didn't win last year. So now FIU, they are good at rushing, and they're really good at passing. They only struggle against the run on defense, allowing 4.9 yards per rush. The Rockets, on the other hand, are very good at running the ball and stopping the pass, but they're also a little suspect against the run, allowing 4.9 yards per rush. There's a reason why Toledo is favored. It's because they run the ball a bit better, right? Well, and they also stop the run a little bit better. But the true question to me is, will they actually be motivated in this bowl game? Will the Toledo Rockets be motivated? Because, they're going to the Bahamas and they've been to many bowl games themselves. Because of the fact that FIU's defense is slightly better as well as yards per point on both sides of the ball, my algorithm kind of has this closer to a pick 'em with even a slight advantage to the Panthers. Plus, you certainly can't hate the fact that the Panthers are second best at 9-2 against the spread. All right? 9-2. I have to believe that these Ohio kids from up north in the cold do not have a ton of opportunities to be on the beach, while Florida International pretty much lives on the beach and is a very short flight to the Bahamas, right? So I'm thinking FIU is going to be all business here, try to win this game. It's important to them to win a bowl game. Well, if I'm a kid from Toledo and I'm playing this bowl game, it's not against a Power 5 team, I'm probably going to be partying the night before this game and not caring nearly as much as FIU, okay? So from a motivational perspective, I have no doubt in my mind that FIU is more motivated than these kids from Toledo. And I think these kids from Toledo, I think they should be partying when they get to the palm trees down there in the nice weather. I have no problem with that. But FIU should be able to cover this spread. Since dogs are so good in bowl games, you have to put the money line sprinkled down there. FIU plus 5.5 in the money line. And I actually lean under the 68.5. On to the next, December 21st, the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, Boise, Idaho, Smurf Turf Central. You have Western Michigan versus BYU. BYU is laying 12 points over under 48.5. That's a lower total for a higher spread. Both of these teams really deserve each other, in my opinion, okay? Western Michigan is probably the worst bowl team out there this year, while BYU lied to us all and pretended to be good by beating Wisconsin and Arizona and then getting destroyed by Washington and Utah State. I mean, destroyed. Didn't cover their spreads. And I bet these Cougars, they've cost some people some money there, and they costed me a little bit. But because of that, they deserve to play in Boise, Idaho, in my opinion, with Uncle Rico on the sidelines. The Broncos went 4-8 this year against the spread and have been very much downhill since they lost PJ Fleck to Minnesota. Okay. I think that ever since that happened, they've just kind of been trending downwards. I'm going to keep this disgusting game short and sweet. All right. BYU is going to run all over Western Michigan, literally run all over them, and they're going to control the ball. BYU can stop the run also. They allow only 3.7 yards per rush, and they played a much harder schedule than Western Michigan. The sharp money hit BYU early, and now there's really no more value. I think this number's been sent up way too fast, all the way to 12. Now, what I do think, this low total, whenever the spread is over 20% of the total, you always lean the dog. So, Western Michigan at plus 12 is over 20% of 48.5. Now, I also lean Western Michigan because I can totally see BYU being up by 17 points and allowing a garbage touchdown to happen at the end of this game, because that's what BYU does to people. And that's why they deserve to be playing for Uncle Rico. Lean Western Michigan plus 12 and a small lean to the under 48.5. So there you have it. Our next episode, we're going to be covering the next Saturday's bowl games on December 22nd. And now it's time for
the Sharp Side of the Force.
Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by uwager.eu. Visit theoddsbreakers.com, click on a uwager banner for a 50% sign-up bonus. So we went over the initial Sharp report last week, and some of it's, I'm sure, changed a bit. As you know, North Texas went from plus 11. It was plus 9 before, down to plus 7.5. Went from a plus 11 to plus 9, now to plus 7.5 pretty much versus Utah State. And it was a sharp side, but it's getting oversteamed. The next one, FIU plus 6 down to plus 5.5 versus Toledo remains sharp. BYU minus 12 versus Western Michigan remains sharp. Houston plus 5 to plus 3 versus Army is a sharp side. Boston College plus 3 versus Boise State is a sharp side. Baylor plus 6.5 all the way down to plus 3.5 versus Vanderbilt remains sharp. Purdue plus 5 down to now plus 3.5 versus Auburn. Syracuse plus 7 all the way down to plus 1.5 versus Western Michigan was because Will Grier announced he will not be playing in the bowl game. Iowa State plus 6.5 down to plus 3.5 versus Washington State is sharp. Some buyback on Florida plus 7.5 versus Michigan, but the initial hit happened when Michigan was laying 6 points. Virginia Tech plus 6.5 down to plus 5 versus Cincinnati is sharp. Northwestern plus 7 versus Utah is gaining some interest there. It's getting close to 20%. And we don't go over these sharp sides unless there's at least 20% difference between ticket count and money, unless there's dual action. Mississippi State minus 5 to minus 7 versus Iowa was over 20%. And I disagree with this one. And I'll tell you right now, it's starting to get close where I'm going to be on Iowa. Sharp totals. Appalachian State versus Middle Tennessee State under 50. Houston versus Army under 67.5 down to 60. Was a huge move. And I still think there's some value there. You know, this thing was way too high. I missed it at first. You can't forget that D'Eriq King is out for Houston, and it happened the game before their last game against Memphis. Huge blow to them. And Army's an option team. When do you bet a freaking option team, triple option, over 58 type points? When do you do that, you know? Very seldom, let's just say. Boston College versus Boise State over 55.5. Sharp. Cal versus TCU under 41.5 is a 48% difference between the ticket count and the money. Most of the tickets are on over. Most of the money is on under 41.5. That's pretty big for a low number. That tells you something. That tells you there's not going to be much scoring at all. Dual action on Wisconsin versus Miami under 48. 99% of the money is on the under right now. West Virginia versus Syracuse under 74 down to 68 because of Will Greer, of course. Stanford versus Pitt over 52. Dual action on NC State versus Texas A&M over 58.5. Let's hit some sharp NFL. Indianapolis minus 2.5 hosting Dallas. Sharp on Buffalo from Pick'em all the way to minus 2.5 hosting Detroit. Sharp on Arizona plus 9 at Atlanta. San Francisco plus 7 all the way down to plus 4.5 versus Seattle. Sharp money was initially on Philadelphia plus 9.5 at LA. And that's going to change because Wentz was just announced out. Carolina plus 7 to plus 6 hosting New Orleans. Sharp NFL totals. Houston versus the New York Jets under 41.5. Dallas versus Indianapolis under 47. Dual action on the Bears versus Packers under 46.5 to 45. Philadelphia versus LA under 53.5. And that's what we have for sharp totals. Let's get into some of our NFL plays, shall we? With Cub Fan Danny. All right, we are back to the NFL. Week 15. Season's almost over. We got Cub Fan Danny. What's up, Danny?
Hey, what's going on, dude?
Oh, man. Racking them up, my friend. Lots of capping to do. College basketball's even going. We're kind of sprinkling in some plays to members and everything. Doing well. And by the way, nice call on Holloway last week. That was my biggest bet in the UFC 231. That dude kicked some major ass. Ortega got his ass clean, man. He was bleeding. I could not believe what he looked like. Rocky Balboa after number 2 against Apollo Creed, man. He was banged up.
I'm gonna tell you that Ortega line went from like plus 120 all the way down to minus 120 before the fight, and I stuck with my guns. I was really confident with that. I couldn't tweet it out because it was way too close as soon as the fight was coming out. It was a gut instinct, but I dropped it in the 4th round as well. So I did really well. That confident in Ortega, in Holloway. I really, listen, sometimes you know, right? And MMA is so much fun to watch. And when you watch these guys and you keep going, you get a good feeling about them. So I'm so glad that I nailed that one. I was so happy, and I did really well this past weekend.
Yeah, man. The main event's usually my biggest bet, and it sure was. And watching them weigh in and remembering what you said to our listeners on the podcast, I was like, Holloway looks like the right pick. And I went hard, and it went well. So really appreciate that advice.
Well, that was fun.
That was fun. That was a great event.
Well, it was Absolutely. A great card, too, guys. Watch UFC.
Absolutely. It's fun. And so what we have is a little NFL coming up, don't we?
Oof. A couple more weeks left. It's so happy and so sad at the same time, right?
Yeah, but you still at least get the playoffs until February. Now it gets pretty thin, and those numbers get pretty sharp, and so sometimes you're betting a couple props, sometimes you're betting little team totals and stuff like that. You get a little bit more creative as you move along, but we did pretty well in team totals last week. We gave out Washington under 18.5 and that hit. And I think team totals might be another play for some of these this week, but we'll give out one of those. But why don't I get started here? I'm gonna